A transport truck loaded with valuable cargo is chased by three Honda Civic Coupes. They strategically position themselves in front of it and using harpoons launch an assault. While on the move, the attackers climb onto the truck and knock out the driver. Suddenly, the road narrows to a single lane, but the attackers skillfully maneuver their cars to get under the trailer, managing to escape with the truck and its goods. The next day, we see a young guy named Brian racing on the track with his green Mitsubishi Eclipse. He's trying to beat his times, but he's not quite there yet. Later, he swaps his car for a red Ford truck and heads to a cafe he frequents called Toretto's. But he's not there for the tuna sandwiches. He's interested in a girl who works there, Mia. Inside the cafe is also the owner and Mia's brother, a huge, strong guy named Dominic Toretto. Just then, four modified cars pull up in front of the place. Their owners are modding enthusiasts and Toretto's friends, but they get annoyed when they spot Brian's truck. One of the crew, Vince, has been trying to win Mia over for a while, and Brian seems to be stepping on his turf. Vince confronts Brian, who chooses to back off, telling Mia he'll see her tomorrow. That response ticks Vince off, sparking a fight. Fed up with the drama, Dominic steps out to break it up and also tells Brian he's just lost his job. Why? Because Brian works at an auto parts store owned by a friend of Toretto's, and Dom's already filled him in on what happened. Brian's boss talks to him, explaining that he's hurting the business. When Toretto races, all the kids want to copy him, buying the same parts he uses and dropping tens of thousands of dollars at the store. Brian manages to calm his boss down and even asks for 2 nitrous tanks for that night, since he's planning to hit some street races. When he arrives, Brian's blown away by the crowd and the number of modified cars at the underground event. The fans are polishing their rides, showing off their engines, and chatting among themselves. We also notice the fan groups are pretty distinct. Latinos, African Americans, Japanese, and Americans, each with their own style of dress and unique ways of modding their cars. A guy from the Latino crew, Hector, approaches Brian to introduce himself, and then another guy, Edwin, does the same. Then Toretto and his crew roll up in their sports cars, ready to race. When Dominic steps out, the community greets him with respect. He's a figure they all admire. His girlfriend, Letty, gets a bit jealous of a couple of girls, so she threatens them to back off. Edwin and Hector say hi to Toretto, since they're apparently friends. Later, Toretto organizes a race where each racer puts up $2,000. Brian wants in, but since he's short on cash, he suggests a different deal. If he loses, he hands over the title to his winning car, but if he wins, he takes the cash and earns everyone's respect. A lot of people laugh, but Brian clarifies that for some, respect means more than money. Words that leave Dominic Toretto thinking. When Brian pops the hood, everyone's impressed by how well-built his car is, so they give him the green light to join the race. The racers hop into their cars and move to a street they block off themselves before lining up. Brian, a bit nervous, overshoots the line a little, showing he's still a rookie. He steadies his nerves, activates the nitrous, and preps his car, just like Toretto. Meanwhile, one of the crew confirms over the radio that no cops are around, so Hector gives the start signal, and the cars take off. Brian lags a bit but hits the nitrous and overtakes Toretto, who was in the lead. But just when it looks like he's got it, Toretto fires up his own nitrous, and Brian loses control, spinning out and dropping out of the race, letting Toretto cross the finish line first. Despite the loss, Brian doesn't seem upset. He smiles and tells Toretto he almost had him. Toretto, proud, replies that it doesn't matter if you win by 1 centimeter or 1 kilometer. Winning is winning. Everyone celebrates. But before the party can keep going, the cops show up. Everyone jumps into their cars and peels out to avoid getting busted. Toretto hides his car in a parking lot and walks off to avoid suspicion, but an officer recognizes him and tries to stop him. Just in time, Brian pulls up and tells him to get in. He floors it and drifts, skillfully dodging the cops. As they drive, Toretto makes it clear that this favor means Brian owes him the car. He also confesses he's been to prison and would rather die than go back. Suddenly, a group of armed bikers surrounds them and forces Brian to pull over. It's a Japanese gang upset that Toretto entered their territory. Dom apologizes, saying they got lost, and Johnny Tran, their leader, decides not to shoot but does destroy Brian's car, which explodes and turns to rubble. While taking a cab back, Toretto explains to Brian that there's tension between him and Johnny over a bad deal and because he slept with Johnny's sister. Once they reach Toretto's place, Dom invites Brian to join the party. Though he's relieved he didn't end up in jail, he's furious with his crew. When he sees them, he chews them out for not coming to get him and for Brian being the only one who did, instead of running off. As a sign of respect, he hands Brian a beer, showing his approval and sparking Vince's obvious anger. Then Mia steps in and pulls Brian to a quieter spot where they talk, flirt, and she tells him Toretto definitely likes him. In Toretto's value system, respect and loyalty are key, and it seems Brian's on his way to earning both. When he tried to join the underground races, betting his car and asking for cash and respect as a reward, most people laughed. Everyone except Toretto, because for him, respect matters more than any amount of money. But we're not talking about just any kind of respect. There's a basic respect we all deserve just for being human, no matter what we do or what we can offer. It's the kind of respect that isn't earned, it's given, because we all have dignity, worth, and the right to be treated with humanity. But there's another type of respect that can be earned or lost, and that's what Brian's after and what Toretto values too. It's a respect built through actions and character, the kind someone earns by showing something valuable, like a skill, a principle, or a trait. Sure, everyone respects different things, but what all earned respects have in common is they're not built with words. They're built with deeds. For Toretto, it's clear someone earns his respect by showing courage, bravery, and loyalty. In tough moments, a person earns it when he knows he can count on them when it's needed most, not just when everything's fine. That's why he was so mad when his friends bailed and left him alone. And that's also why, when Brian showed up to help him escape the cops with no obligation to do so, he started earning his respect and loyalty. Because loyalty, though I'll dive deeper into that later, is tied to trust. And trust isn't built with promises, it's built with actions that prove you won't fail when things get rough. And Brian proved that right then. Why would Toretto value that? Well, I think because in his position, it's everything. He's the leader of a crew living on the edge. You know what? Any day what they do could land them arrested or worse. And he himself said he'd rather die than go back to jail. That's why loyalty and guts are essential. The next day, we see a patrol stop Brian, cuff him, and take him to FBI offices with no apparent reason. But when he gets there, we realize Brian's actually friends with these cops, and not just friends. He works for the FBI as an undercover agent. His mission is to find out who's behind the truck heists pulled off by a crew using modified Honda Civics. So far, though, Brian's come up empty. That means all the flirting with Mia and the budding friendship with Toretto are just part of his cover. His boss, Agent Bilkins, rips into him for stalling the investigation. Brian says the only leads he has are that the cars are Honda Civics, the culprit's tied to the street racing scene, and they use Mashimoto ZX tires. Though he doesn't know who, he's sure Dominic Toretto does. All he asks for is more time. But before he can go on, Bilkins cuts him off, raising his voice to say they're out of time. If he doesn't make progress soon, no promotion for him, and the truckers might take matters into their own hands while the department keeps losing money funding the cars for Brian's infiltration. Before leaving, one agent asks if he thinks Toretto could be the guy, given his record for taking someone out, which makes Brian second-guess himself, but he still holds firm that it's too early to jump to conclusions. Plus, he requests another car. With everything we've seen, we can start piecing together a clearer picture of Brian's starting point, especially at work. Right from the start, it's obvious he's not valued much there. His superiors don't treat him well, they demand impossible results, constantly pressure him, and as we'll see later, when he shows doubt or something more human, they mock him or call him weak. He's got no real connections in that environment. Brian doesn't feel basic respect, belonging, or a bond with anyone. It seems like he's there out of necessity, not conviction. And if we look closely, outside work, he seems totally alone too. We don't see him with a partner or friends. The only thing that really excites him is the car world, mechanics, and racing. But even that passion he lives solo, he's got no one to share it with. Maybe that's why, though he doesn't fully get it at first, he's drawn to Toretto's crew. There's something about them that calls to him, something he's been searching for, maybe without realizing it, feeling like part of something. The next day, Brian shows up at Toretto's mechanic shop with a wrecked car to hand over as part of his debt. Toretto laughs, but when he checks the engine, he sees it has potential. He accepts it as payment, but makes it clear the repair costs are on Brian, and the debt's only settled when the car runs. Plus, he says that, while Brian's not working at the auto parts store, he'll work at his shop. He'll also sign him up for a desert race to earn money and cover the expenses. Brian's thrilled to agree. At the shop, Brian gets to know Jesse better, a guy from Toretto's crew who's a mechanical genius. Jesse shares that he dropped out of school because of his attention deficit, though that doesn't stop him from doing what he loves. He says engines have a way of calming him. Later, we see Brian at a kind of family meal with Toretto and the rest of the group. Though they're not blood relatives, their friendship feels rock solid. Brian's mostly welcomed by everyone, mostly because Vince is still hurt. The girl he liked now has eyes for Brian, and he feels his spot in the crew's at risk. Things heat up when Mia flirts with Brian in front of Vince just to make him jealous. And it works. Vince loses it while working at the auto parts store. Brian starts suspecting a group of Mexican racers who order exactly 3 of each part. Later, he checks out their garage but finds their cars don't match the ones used in the heists. As he leaves, Vince knocks him out and drags him to where Toretto is. They point a gun at him and warn him to watch what he says, now suspecting he might be a cop. Luckily, Brian justifies his behavior by saying he's under pressure from the desert race. He needs to win because he owes a car and can't afford to lose. Brian, Toretto, and Vince sneak into the Japanese racer's shop and find stolen gear linked to the heists, mostly electronics. But before they can act, Johnny Tran shows up with his gang, so they hide and watch as Johnny beats a guy to get info on some engines. The next day, Brian heads back to the FBI office. His superiors are pressed for time, so they suggest arresting Johnny Tran to get intel. But Brian insists it's too soon and defends Toretto, convinced he's not the culprit. Tension spikes when a coworker makes a sleazy comment about Mia, suggesting she's distracted him, which sets Brian off, and he punches him, a line he'd never crossed before. Another agent confronts him, asking if he's turning into one of them. The next morning, while finishing prep for the desert race, Dominic takes Brian to his garage and shows him a special car, a 1970 Dodge Charger RT he built with his dad. It's got 900 horsepower and ran a quarter mile in 9 seconds. But Dom's never driven it. He tells Brian his dad died in a race, crashing into a wall after another driver hit him. He watched him burn, and though people say his dad screamed, it was really him. Days later, Dom beat the culprit to death with a wrench. As a result, he was banned from the circuit. Since then, he's lived by one rule. I live my life a quarter mile at a time, because for those 10 seconds, nothing matters. No debts, no past, just freedom. That night, Brian goes out with Mia. During the date, he tries to pry some info about how the crew formed, but Mia says they're not a gang, just a group of friends, almost a family. She calls Toretto the Gravity. Everyone orbits him because he's a leader and a guide. That's how the others join, sticking with him through thick and thin. This is key to digging deeper into loyalty. During dinner, Mia told Brian that Jesse and Leon, another crew member, showed up one night and never left. She also said Toretto's been with Letty since he was 16. With those people, he basically built a family that's never split. But why? What makes them so loyal to Toretto? We could say loyalty is that bond that keeps you by someone's side, not because they ask, but because it comes from within. It's like a commitment you make to yourself to support, protect, and keep believing in the value of a relationship, even when things get tough. And as I mentioned, loyalty goes hand in hand with trust. Trust isn't built with pretty words, but with actions that prove it. As I said, you won't bail when things get hard. And that's exactly why I think the crew's so loyal to Toretto, because he's been there when they needed him most. He's shown in both calm and tough times that he cares, looks out for them, and they can count on him. Someone like that inspires that kind of loyalty. The only one we know more about is Jesse, who admitted he has an attention deficit and felt like a failure at school. Later, we'll see Toretto and the crew are all he's got. Though we don't know Leon or Letty's past details, we can guess it's not much different. Likely each felt alone or out of place at some point, like they didn't fit anywhere. And in those moments, Toretto was there, gave them a spot, treated them with respect, and offered a place to belong. Sometimes that's all someone needs to give their loyalty, because you don't forget who held you up when everything seemed to collapse. After dinner, Brian and Mia spend the night together, but in the early morning, Brian's superiors call. Since they've got no evidence and know Johnny has gear that might be stolen, they've decided to arrest him. The next day, Brian joins the undercover op. They burst into Johnny's house while he's eating with his family. His dad's disappointment is so strong, he slaps him in front of everyone. But the mission's a total bust. Agent Bilkins tells Brian all the seized electronics had legit receipts, so they got nothing. Frustrated, Bilkins snaps, "Hey, this is the kind of smarts I can expect from you." Surprised, Brian replies he never said Johnny was guilty or ordered the arrest. Bilkins cuts him off, saying it doesn't matter. He can blame whoever he wants since that's his job, and gives him an ultimatum. Find the culprit in 32 hours or he's fired. Brian storms out of the office, fuming. A co-worker approaches and says he's sure Toretto's the guy, but Brian won't admit it because he can't see past Mia. He ends with a line that sticks with Brian. There are different kinds of family, but in the end, it's a choice you'll have to make. This co-worker is Officer Tanner, actually Brian's direct boss, though Bilkins has more authority, being above them both. Still, Tanner's been someone who listens to Brian, gets him, and because of that, he's picked up on Brian getting emotionally involved with Mia and the community he's met. With this chat, he lets Brian know he's aware, but isn't forcing him to do anything. He just reminded him of his mission to let Brian decide. But as viewers, we can sense Brian's already picked Toretto, and that shouldn't surprise us. Belonging is a basic psychological need. Abraham Maslow nailed it in his famous pyramid. After meeting physical and safety needs, we seek to be part of something. But Brian's alone. In his personal life, he's got no partner, no friends, no one to share his true interests with, and at work he finds no belonging or connection. Instead, he feels constantly judged and pressured, leaving him emotionally drained. In fact, lots of organizational psychology studies show that a sense of belonging is one of the biggest factors in job satisfaction, sometimes even more than pay or prestige. A cold or hostile environment can strip meaning from any task, no matter how interesting. But a setting with support, recognition, and camaraderie can make even the toughest jobs emotionally bearable. And that's what I think Brian found with Toretto. Suddenly, a group appeared that treats him kindly, shares his passions, offers camaraderie, and above all, feels like a family, a place where his presence matters. When you come from the loneliness of feeling invisible or judged, finding that feels like coming home. I can imagine what that must have meant to him. When you've been through a painful or uncomfortable experience, anything good feels so much better. It's like seeing a normal picture after a bunch of ugly ones. Suddenly, the normal looks beautiful. That's how our minds work, and that's why this crew feels almost irresistible to Brian. The next day, the car Brian owed Toretto is finally ready, and he'll use it for the desert race happening that day. Brian drives with Dominic Toretto as his passenger. On the way, they face off against a Ferrari in an impromptu race. Brian does so well that Toretto watches him with admiration. But during a stop at a diner, Brian takes the next step. He complains to Toretto about needing cash and hints that he knows the shop and diner earnings don't cover what he spends on engines. He straight up says that if Toretto's into something else, he wants in. Toretto calmly replies that if he nails the desert race, they can talk. But for Brian, things start falling apart. First, Jesse bets his dad's car in a race against Johnny Tran and loses. Instead of handing it over, he bolts. Johnny, furious, confronts Dominic to demand it. But Dom insists he speak with respect since he's not in his neighborhood. Johnny blows up, accusing him of snitching to the cops. True to his code, Dominic throws a punch, saying he never rats anyone out. That reaction makes Brian face what he didn't want to accept. Dominic's behind the truck heists. That night, as the event unfolds, Brian watches from afar as Toretto argues with Mia. She begs him not to go, but Dom, with Letty, Vince, and another crew member, hop into their cars and leave amid the chaos. Brian rushes to ask Mia what's happening, but she won't spill. So Brian makes a tough call, revealing his true identity. He's been an undercover cop since meeting her, but his feelings for her are real. He explains that tonight, every cop in the city's watching the trucks to catch the culprits, and now the truckers are armed. He warns that if she doesn't tell him where they're headed, Toretto and his friends could end up dead or jailed. Moved and worried, Mia agrees to help. They get into the car Brian fixed with Toretto, and he requests a satellite track on Dominic's phone. Meanwhile, Toretto's crew reaches a house on the outskirts where they stash the 3 black Honda Civics used in the heists. Though there's doubt, Dominic insists this is the score they've waited months for, and if it goes well, they can take a long vacation. The crew moves out. They catch up to the truck and start the assault. As Dominic drives, Vince rips off the Civic's windshield and leaps onto the truck. But before he can get in, the driver pulls a shotgun and fires. Vince hangs on, wounded and in a critical spot, about to fall in front of the trailer. Toretto tries to help from his car, but Vince's arm gets tangled in a cable. The trucker shoots out Dominic's tires and forces Letty off the road, wrecking her car. Toretto orders his other teammate to go back for her, so now it's just him to save Vince. But another shot disables his car. When all seems lost, Brian speeds in, leaves Mia at the wheel, and jumps onto the truck to rescue Vince. He untangles his arm, helps him up, and they both make it to safety. Toretto, Letty, and the other member reach Brian. The problem? Vince is losing a lot of blood. So Brian pulls out his phone and, with no other choice, announces in front of everyone. I'm Officer Brian O'Connor, Special Agent. I need an emergency helicopter. Toretto can't believe his ears. Furious, he clenches his fist to hit him, but something stops him. Once the helicopter takes Vince, Dominic flees with his team, leaving Brian alone. When Brian risked his life to save Vince, some might think it was duty or compassion, but looking closer, it wasn't for Vince from the start. Their relationship was hostile. They yelled, fought, and Vince never fully accepted Brian. So why risk it for someone who's dissed you? The truth is, Brian didn't do it for Vince. He did it for Dominic Toretto. Vince is part of Dom's family, and Brian knows that. When you're loyal to someone, you don't just care about them, you care about what they love. And saving Vince was a way to look out for Dom. Dom likely got it. He knew Brian and Vince didn't get along, and that's exactly why seeing Brian risk it for someone he clashed with made him respect him even more. Because as I said, acts that come from choice, not obligation, are what truly build respect. That's where trust starts, and from that trust, loyalty grows. Now, up to this point, it might seem like Brian betrayed the cops and switched sides, but the truth is, Brian was never loyal to the force. He was just obedient, and that's different. Obedience comes from authority. You do what you're told because someone with power orders it. Loyalty comes from a bond. You do what you do because you care. And with the police, Brian never felt that bond. Never felt part of anything. But the story doesn't end there. Brian speeds to Toretto's house. Dom's waiting, shotgun in hand. Brian draws his gun and aims, but clarifies he won't call the cops. Dom doesn't have to run. Hurt, Toretto yells that he is the cops, then reveals he's not fleeing. All he wants is to find Jesse before Johnny does and kills him for not handing over the car he lost in the race. Before tension escalates further, Jesse shows up, nervously apologizing, saying he didn't know what he was doing and was scared. But they don't get far. Johnny Tran and his gang roar in on bikes and open fire, and Jesse dies in the arms of his chosen family. Brian jumps into his car to chase them. Toretto does too, this time driving the Dodge Charger RT he built with his dad. The pursuit kicks off. Brian's the first to catch up, dodging bullets through the streets. Toretto arrives soon after and takes out one biker. Brian lines up, aims, and precisely drops the second. Further on, they hit an empty street. Toretto says he used to race there as a kid and that it's exactly a quarter mile to the train tracks, adding, "When the light turns green, I'm going to try." The light changes and they go. Toretto's car pulls ahead but falters, losing speed. The train gates start to lower. Still, neither stops. They're ready to risk it all. They floor it and cross by mere seconds before the impact. Toretto looks at Brian with respect, but just when it seems over, a truck appears out of nowhere and slams into Toretto's car, leaving it wrecked and Dom injured. Brian rushes to help him out. Dom looks resigned, hearing distant police sirens. He's got no car, no escape, but Brian, tears in his eyes, hands him the keys to his own ride. "I owe you a new car," he says. Toretto asks if he knows what he's doing, and Brian says yes. With a look, Toretto tells him they're even, then gets in and drives off. Brian came as a cop with a mission to infiltrate, gain trust, and catch the culprits. But along the way, he found a crew that made him feel like he belonged. When it came time to choose between following orders or staying true to those who reached out to him, he didn't hesitate. Letting Toretto go was the peak of his transformation. That's why Toretto didn't shoot or overpower him for the keys, because Brian's actions spoke louder than any words. No one forced him to risk his life for Vince or call for a helicopter to save him. No one demanded he chase Jesse's killers. No one made him race alongside Dom instead of pursuing him to arrest him. But Brian did it all, and he did it because he wanted to, because at some point, he started seeing them as his people. And I love the final sequence of Brian and Toretto racing together. It's so symbolic. When you race alongside someone instead of chasing them, it's because you're not on the opposite side anymore. You're with them, on the same side, one of their own. And to wrap up the video, I'd like to revisit Toretto's philosophy. Live life a quarter mile at a time. For him, racing was an escape. In those few seconds, there's no past, no future, no fear, no worries, just the here and now. After losing his dad, Dom stopped making long-term plans. He learned to live that way, not carrying everything at once, focusing only on what's in front of him. Living a quarter mile at a time is a way of saying, today, I'm giving my all, not for what I lost or fear losing, but because this moment is all I truly have. I'll focus on the next step without getting stuck on what's gone or what might come. The past is done, the future's not here yet, and though we can't change what's happened, we can use the present to build something better. We move forward one step at a time. So if you ever feel like problems are overwhelming you, if your mind's full of things that went wrong or could go wrong, maybe try pausing, breathing, and facing it a quarter mile at a time. Thanks so much for sticking with me to the end of this video. If you're not subscribed to my channel yet, you can do it right now.